fill a number of different roles. And when Cody suggested I introduce myself, I thought, well, there's actually quite a bit to cover from a roles and responsibilities point of view, but that's the boring stuff. What actually matters at the end of the day is what we're all trying to do is solve customer problems and go about that in a way in which we can get to the actual problem points at the end of the day. Because if we're not solving customer problems and giving them a better experience in whatever platform or product that we're designing for, then there's no point in doing what we're doing. And that's what we want to focus on today is understanding our customers and tackling digital disruption in this changing landscape that we're all dealing in. And we're going to, in this next, I suppose, 28 minutes now, chat a bit about digital disruption, what it is, how it's affecting all of us. And we're going to propose or position concept discovery sprints to be that solution to tackle digital disruption, because we need ways in which we can prepare our businesses and get innovative in the way we do things. And then finally, we're obviously going to be looking at the tools and techniques and the practical elements in what we can do, whether it's in a concept discovery sprint, whether it's in a regular sprint in which we're dealing with, and how we can implement that as we go about our projects. So I think before I ramble on, Cody, over to you to give us a bit of an intro.
Cool, thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. So as Mike mentioned, I'm Cody Gaskin. And as previously said, I help Mike. We both work in the concept discovery sprint digital service offering at IQ Business. Really grateful for this opportunity to speak to you all. And I'm sure we're going to share some really great insights and skills in building product in a digitally disrupted world. Great, so let's get right into it. So let's start with the answer. Concept discovery sprints are the answer to building product in a digitally disrupted world. Let me tell you why. First of all, we need to understand that, sorry, Mike, I can just go to the next slide quickly. First of all, we need to understand that digital disruption is not an event that has taken or will take place. It's a continuous bombardment of new challenges, competitors, technologies, and customer demands and expectations. I'm sure you guys all know what I'm talking about. How do we handle this constant change? By having a continuous innovation framework, like our concept discovery sprint, it allows for adaptation. It encourages innovation through new technology with continuous customer engagement and insights. But what about the speed of change? Digital disruption is accelerating at a pace never seen before, as products and business models go almost extinct overnight. The only way to keep up is to change the way we have traditionally built products. How do we combat the speed of change? Well, we need to become more nimble in our approach to design and allow change to become part of the organization's culture through creating a culture of experimentation and innovation. Even more importantly, though, we need to remember that our customer is at the center of digital disruption. As our customers' needs, values, and expectations transform through emerging digital technologies, being more empathetic in the way we build product needs to become embedded in the tools that we use. Having the customer at the center of your product will allow you to stay focused on the problems you're solving for them. As their needs and problems change, so will you. And we're going to be talking about some of those tools we're going to be exploring some of those tools in a bit. But some of you might be wondering what digital disruption is all about. Mike, why don't you just tell us a little bit more about it?
Perfect, Cody. Yeah, so I think a lot of the time we try to pin down a definition, but maybe a quick what digital disruption is not. And we often think of these big, massive ideas, your Elon Musks of the world, and a lot of the big disruption that takes place and the new technologies that are implemented. But a lot of the time, it's not these radical shifts. It's actually those small incremental updates and changes that we make in either our products and processes in the way we do things. And it's those small little changes that actually make all the difference. And often it comes down to simply just understanding your customers and then taking what our customers perceive as something better or what they might not even know is even better, and actually going about and implementing that. As a quick example, I'm sure we're all familiar with some of our mobile point of sale solutions, that being Zappa and your SnapScans and the like. So they've actually disrupted the point of sale market. And what they've essentially done and is gone in and thrown out the technology to say who needs card machines. And what they've gone and done, and what they do is actually take what used to be an old outdated process of waiting for your waiter and waving him down or her down and saying, please can I pay with my card machine? And they've understood the customer journey and realized that customers are actually, they've got the bill at their hands and all they want to do is make a payment. So they've just gone and added a QR code at the bottom of your receipts, let's say when you're at a restaurant, and that gives the power in the hands of the customer to quickly scan that QR code and make a payment. So interestingly here, what isn't the disruptors, the technology? The technology might be great. They might have some fantastic banking integrations and various APIs that they've brought in, but that's actually not what's driving the disruption. The disruption is the innovation to seamlessly integrate into that customer journey. So what we're seeing more and more is that technology is being commoditized. It's available to everyone. It's not your competitive advantage anymore, but the way in which we can innovate and understand our customers and embed some innovation into that customer journey is what's driving that disruption. And I think we all need to be on top of that understanding and that innovation process in order to attract and retain our customers in a better way and grow our business. And a quick look at what disruption actually is and where it comes into play. So what we're seeing more and more is that we need to get rid of outdated processes. Disruption is saying out with the old and in with the new, and changing up the way we're doing things. And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to change. Kodak is a great example. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. In their heyday, I think I saw they were valued at $31 billion in 96, so 25 years later, that value is a lot higher than that. And they own the market, 2/3 of the camera market. And fast forward to 2012, and they filed for bankruptcy. Now, some of the misconceptions is that they failed due to lack of investment into the digital camera market. They invented the first digital camera. They invested billions of dollars into digital cameras. And even they looked into the way that people are going to share media and content online. But what they actually failed to understand is their overall business model. So they still relied on camera sales and printing their photos and so on. And they thought this is all going to drive a boom in photo printing, all this new emphasis on photography. But they failed to transform their business and still relied on old ways of doing things. So what we're seeing and what we're going to propose with our concept discovery sprints is the need to be agile. And you need to have innovation needs to have a voice in your business and to align technology, your people, and your processes in order to think of new and better ways of doing things. So one step further to that is, with all this disruption taking place, is a lot of unknowns. Before, we might have had an idea of what we can predict in a year or two's time, but now the amount of unknowns is it's growing at a crazy rate, and it's almost become the norm. But we need to get around that, because especially in constrained economies, we can't be taking these massive risks where we say, well, we've got this new idea that our customers are going to love, and then all of a sudden it's a case of, oh, well, they actually don't really like it. And we've just invested all these millions of rands and it hasn't resulted in that return. So what concept discovery sprints do, it one allows a fail fast culture. So get rid of these uncertainties and let's find ways in which we can either know that something's going to fail, and if it fails, that's great. That's a positive outcome. Just a quick story. We did some work for a music IP lawyer in the UK. And she had this great idea to build in blockchain technology and securing her musicians' IP rights. And she had some big musicians on her book, I think Ed Sheeran and Adele. So we didn't quite get to the user testing part, unfortunately. But what we actually found was it's a great idea and people loved it. But the viability that you're seeing a bit, that element was lacking because it wasn't the right time in the markets. Apple Music came up with something similar. And her short sprint of 1.5 weeks which is a nominal fee really at the end of the day, actually end up saving a huge amount of money. So concept discovery sprints allow us to quickly gain that insight. So let's take a quick look at what we're talking about here and what underpins our concept discovery sprints in this disruptive innovation.
Well, look, our primary goal is to help clients test and validate concepts. One way we do this, like Mike mentioned, is running our concept discovery sprints, which run between about 1 to 4 weeks. In essence, we're really trying to answer 3 questions in a product concept. The first one is this idea desirable? Which is basically saying, do potential users and customers really want this? The next question we're trying to ask is the idea feasible? Which is also just trying to say, can this idea be implemented and built? And then thirdly, we want to know, is this idea viable? Is there a sound business case and opportunity here? Really, you want to make sure that your product concepts or your offering sits between the 3 of those key principles. You want to make sure it meets each one of those goals. But when testing your assumptions against those 3 questions, we need to remember to use the right tools at the right time. Producing an MVP before you have even validated whether you have a problem worth solving, that's super wasteful. So how do we know what tools to use at what point? It's all based on how uncertain you are of your assumptions you have made. If you're highly uncertain of the customer problem and solution idea, then conducting user interviews makes more sense and is also more cost effective than building a fully fledged MVP. As you become more certain, you can increase your fidelity in the tools that you use to validate your assumptions, to test different ideas, to fail fast. Each step in the process should be helping you validate your assumptions, learning, adapting, and becoming more certain in the direction you're going. We want to do this very quickly. Mike, let's talk about how we actually do this really quickly.
Yeah, so typically, like Cody said, a concept discovery sprint can be anywhere from 1 week to 4 weeks, even 6 weeks at some stages. But no matter the time, it's just five key stages to that, whether it's 5 days, whether, like I said, it's 5 weeks, 6 weeks. And you might look at this timeline and think a lot of these elements are a design thinking led approach, which they are largely underpinned by, but we incorporate customer experience design as well as a lean methodology as well. So we take a lot of those different approaches and start, as anyone does, with understanding the problem, understanding the users. And that then allows us to find ways in which to ideate and come up with some great ideas on how to solve those problems. That then moves into having those problems, and now let's go and prototype those problems. Let's bring it, the prototype those solutions and ideas. Let's bring it to life. Let's get something in the hands of our users, and that leads us then on to the user testing elements. And once we start user testing, we start knowing, is what we're doing a good idea? Is it something that our customers are going to use and actually want? And ultimately, that produces on the final stages answering those 3 key questions that Cody discussed, and having a pitch deck to say, yes, this is a great idea, or no, it's nearly there, you just got to pivot in some way. And that's 5 days of a concept discovery sprint, or 5 stages. And I think let's have a look with those stages in mind. Let's get into some more practical side other than the theory and some great examples. Let's look at some of the interesting tools and techniques. So you'll see it split out kind of by that process that we've just discussed. And I suppose to jump straight in. And this is, by the way, it's a Miro board. It's a really nice facilitation tool. So if you want to run one of these tools or techniques in a project, Miro is a great solution. There's many out there. It allows you to pop a few stickies on, very collaborative and interactive. So as an example, the first tool that we want to look at is a problem definition. We've got a great idea. So whoever started, I can't remember the name of the person who started Zapper, but they would have thought, well, I've actually identified this problem, and people are waiting for for their bill. They're waiting for the card machine for minutes on end. And let's rather try and find a solution to that problem. So they've mentioned their customer here, Daisy the diner, and they go through a process of understanding the problem, knowing when and where it occurs and why it actually happens, and who we're dealing with. You can go through another technique here of defining the market. So a bit more on the markets analysis side of things. It's knowing who we're dealing with, our customers at the end of the day, and some of their pain points. We'll deal with that in a persona mapping in a bit. And we really want to get to a case of understanding the alternatives, because that starts that process of thinking, how can we best solve for that? And then you go one step further, and you might have a number of problems and even sub-problems, kind of smaller sets to those problems. And then you want to evaluate each of those, because I think we see every day, everyone's got a great idea. Everyone finds great problems to solve, but it's choosing those specific problems that are going to be worth it. So a problem evaluation matrix here, you go through a process of understanding, is it popular? Is this problem growing? So is it something that's happening more and more in the markets? Is it expensive? That's not a game changer or not a showstopper by any means, but you just need to, when you're weighing up two problems, it's important. And then urgent, mandatory, and frequent, to know that how frequent and how common is this. And then lastly, from our first understanding process and stage is the persona definition. So personas being the typical users that you think will be using your app or solution, and you go about mapping some of their characteristics, such as what are their biggest frustrations, what attributes do they have, and some other possibly socioeconomic or demographic information. They are a bit controversial at the moment, because a lot of people say you can't just group your users into one or two personas. So there's that to consider, but it does bring it to life, and you start visualizing and understanding who your users are. Okay, so we understand our problem now. Great. Now let's think of creative ways to solve that problem. So like we said, the disruption element is taking those small changes and thinking of how we can improve a process. Now, your brainstorming is a great tool. It's actually quite rudimentary. It's whether you in person or on a board like this, give everyone in the room, whether it's us, the VAs, your UX designers, your product owners, your architect leads, whoever they are, give everyone a sticky and say, we want to solve the problem that we have for our customers. So go ahead and think of wild, creative ideas. So contrary to what I said about the incremental changes, go wild. Think of great ideas on how we can solve these customer problems. Because that's what that is going to do, is allow people to get creative and think of unique ways, and then go to a process of actually voting on those ideas. So give everyone the power to vote on what they think is the best idea, and come up with a winner or winners. And that then takes us to have a core solution feature list of saying, these are some of the core features we want to introduce in our solution and in the prototype, which we'll go through shortly. And then you refine it from there. We go back to that elements of disruption not being brand new technology, but those small ways, and you start refining it from there. Okay, problem done. We've got some great ideas. So you can start seeing this swim lane. Now, what we want to start doing is taking that understanding and saying, well, let's make sure we stay on track. We're solving for the right problems, and we've got the right vision at the end of the day. Every great company's got a great vision, and we make those companies make sure you stick to that vision, because if you're going to make a decision, it has to align to that vision. So here's one technique that you can go, you say, so it's for customers, going back to the Zap example, or restaurant goers who don't have time to wait for card machines. Our solution is a point of sale QR code that customers can quickly use to scan their bill. And that provides ready-to-use point-of-sale solutions for customers at the table. Unlike traditional sale machines that take a long time to be made available and complete the job, our solution provides a quick and easy way for users to empower customers to pay their bill on their own. So something short and simple like that is quite an efficient process on aligning a vision. Then let's head to the business model.
Cool. Now, what we need to understand about the business model is your product is made up of a multiple of components. We've discussed the problem. There's the customer, there's the revenue model, there's a solution, there's your marketing channels, etc. Ultimately, we want to map this out in a way that, or we want to reframe this in a way that makes sense and can help us sort of test and validate our business model. And what we use is the lean canvas. Now, the lean model canvas helps us frame our business model. It's adapted from the business model canvas, but it takes a more lean thinking approach. By reframing our business model, what that does, it helps us decide what areas we are still unsure of and maybe still need to validate. Not all business models work. The goal is to find a combination of those components that make up the best model to solve the problems you're trying to solve. Again, we need to do this with the guiding pillars of desirability, feasibility, and viability. Once we've mapped out our business model canvas, and we've got a really good understanding of what that business model looks like, we then go into mapping out our assumptions. So during this whole process, whether uncovering the problem, brainstorming and coming up with the solution, and even going through our business model, we've already started, putting down a lot of assumptions, a lot of things that we believe is the answer or the solution, or even, problems that we believe are actual problems that our customers have. So we've got a lot of these assumptions. And really what we want to do is start mapping out those assumptions and knowing which we need to validate, which ones we need to test and make sure that it is actually the answer, or it is actually the problem that we need to solve for. So we plot this on our assumption map based on how much evidence is known versus unknown, and how important it is in affecting the viability, desirability, and feasibility of our solution. But we plot these on our graph and focus on assumptions where we don't have evidence and risky or important to our business model. Then, once we've identified the assumptions that we want to validate of highest priority, we prioritize those assumptions that we have little evidence first. And those that we have more evidence are prioritized thereafter. And we plot those in sort of a Kanban model. Thereafter, we can start determining what experiments we need to run based on how much evidence we have and what we're trying to validate. Remember our uncertainty fidelity principle. We need to spend our efforts economically where it makes sense. Once we have a good idea of the types of experiments we want to run, whether that's a customer interview, whether that's a wireframe, whether that's a storyboard, once we have an idea of what we want to do, we actually need to start putting it together. We need to bring that idea to life. Now we know what it is we want to test and validate, and we can start building our user interviews, storyboards, and wireframes and prototypes. But we need to remember we need to be specific about what we want to test. Our experiments need to be purposeful with objectives. Remember, the goal is to gain insight into our customer and their problems and our solution. How well we plan our experiments now will determine how successful we are in testing. And nowadays, it's there's so many tools out there. It's really easy to really put wireframes, to put prototypes together. There's so much low-code tools available now to even move into the MVP stage is also really quick, and you can do that really quickly nowadays with many tools that are available. What are we looking at here? You can see there's Figma, and there's a whole lot of tools that we can use. Once we've built our prototypes and we have our experiments that we want to test against our experimental Kanban, we need to start testing it. We have our experiments, we need to get it in front of our users. The focus at this point in time is to test our experiments or our prototypes on a very specific target audience. Your early adopter, someone who experiences the problem you're solving for every day. With testing, you have to know the difference between verification and validation. User testing helps us verify that our solution is designed right, and it speaks to the user experience. But solution testing helps us validate that our solution is the right thing to solve for our customer problems. It helps us know whether we have a solution that is desirable, a product that is feasible, and a business model that is viable. Both user testing and solution testing are different. Both verification and validation are different, but both are needed. Our concept discovery sprint is by no means a silver bullet to building products and testing this with users, but it's the best first step as part of a continuous framework towards building products at scale. So we test it, and the idea is to really get some insights and really know whether we have a great product.
Exactly, Cody. Yeah. So, and to know whether we've got a great product or not, and to know whether what we've built actually meets our customers' demands, we go back to the 3 pillars that we spoke about earlier. And those 3 pillars are going to answer things such as: is it real? What we put in the hands of customers, is it actually desirable? Like Cody said, is it something that they want to use? Is it something that they even need in the first place? And if they can use it, can we win? We've gone through some great ideation. Teams have come up with these wild and crazy ideas. Is it actually feasible to go and implement that solution? And then finally, is it worth it? That's critical. Is there that business case? They might have this great blockchain IP solution, but if it's not viable at the end of the day to actually get return on investment in this idea, then there's no point in doing it. So I think in closing, what we really want to emphasize is when you answer these 3 questions, it's not a 6-month-long project. I'm sure we've all been stuck on very tedious and lengthy waterfall projects. Nothing wrong with waterfall either, but just the amount of time that it takes to build something versus what you can do in 1 to 4 or even 6 weeks, which isn't that long at the end of the day, is so powerful. You need to allow your teams to fail fast, fail early, or succeed early as well, and put the power in their hands to be innovative and be creative. And when we do that, we're in a much better position to tackle digital disruption that we're all experiencing and come up with some fantastic new tools and features for our customers and make our customers happy at the end of the day, because that's what we're all in business for, is to meet the needs of our customers. So that was a real whirlwind of 30 minutes, tools and techniques, and some interesting ideas that hopefully you can take going forward. We can more than happy to share a lot of this information, and hopefully you can take a lot of this, the techniques that we've presented into your day-to-days and into your various projects. So I think now is probably a good time for Q&A, hopefully just on time. You can get in touch as well. Either you can scan there for LinkedIn, or go on iqbusiness.net and get some more information there. So yeah, floor is open if there are any questions.
Mike, can you make Lesego the host again?
Sure. Let's do this. Sorry, give me 1 second.
She's in as Edward Ngubani, the first one.
Oh yeah, that's what I was missing. Okay. Okay, there we go.
Brilliant. Okay, Lesego, the floor is yours.
All right, I've just went through the chats. I see there are no questions there. It's quite interesting, but maybe let's just give it a minute or 2 to just ask if there are any questions from anyone before we just also wrap up from my side and close off the session. Okay, going once, going twice, gone. All right, thank you so much.
Sorry, it was quicker to ask if I can ask as opposed to typing.
Yes, Sonia, you can go ahead.
Fantastic presentation. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Really enjoyed it. A quick question to you. During discovery phase, it's actually quite difficult to necessarily from a consulting, contracting perspective, ask customers to sponsor or pay, how do you specifically sell the value of the discovery phase to the client?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time it's actually the step before your discovery phase. So I know some of the banks, they call it a sprint zero, but a lot of the time it's geared towards implementing that solution. So often it comes from an aspect of someone's got a great idea and it literally just is an idea. So it's more a case of before even investing a long discovery sprint, that more likely than not will end in the project being implemented, and they usually quite a bit more heavy from a resource point of view and a time point of view. So it's a step before that to say, well, if we're going in and solving a lot of these problems, we come up with prototypes, and from that prototype, you almost already have a mini backlog that you can take into a discovery phase. And that firstly shortens the discovery phase massively, gives a lot of reassurance to our project teams and to the excos and so on, that we can say, well, we've already come in with this prototype and as well as a mini backlog, and we've got some assurance that this is going to succeed and maybe pivot here and there. So it just gives a lot more surety and clarity for the project team. And like I said, you've got a number of artifacts that you can take going forward. Just one more element to add, when we initially started on this journey, we wanted to be quite low code focused, to say that there's actually, while it might be low code, you can reuse a lot of that in the prototypes that you build, but realize that's not actually the be all and end all. As long as it's just it's an artifact that can be used in some way, whether it's in testing going forward and helping build that backlog, that's really key to it. So yeah, I hope that answers your question from the point of view that it's artifacts going forward and giving that surety for the project team, which might be quite a lengthy project in particular.
If I could add to that, Mike, before we move on to the next question, I think, Sonia, it also boils down to, how do you want to manage your risk? Are you willing to spend 2 million on building an MVP, or a fraction of that, figuring out whether or not this is an idea with legs, with an idea that you actually want to invest in? So it sort of boils down to managing your risk and obviously spending or being economical with the risks that you take.
So Cody and Mike, thanks for that presentation. I think it was flipping amazing. Yeah, and I think just talking to that, coming also from an NGO called Agile Ventures, and IQ Business, we use a lot of these concept sprints, and that risk factor that you're speaking about, Cody. It's better to pay 100,000 Rand than it is to pay 1 million Rand in mistakes. And I think that's where this validation really helps us from an NGO's perspective to save money. So yeah, I think this is very insightful and very great and awesome to see. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah, just a quick example. We ran a concept discovery sprint for one of our banks. They were wanting to introduce a stockfile solution, and they're actually about to go ahead and implement it. And we ran a concept discovery sprint, and what we actually realized is that the customers themselves don't really know or trust it. So it was going to be a 13 million Rand implementation, and if they had implemented then it actually wouldn't have had the traction that it got, because then what happened is they realized that there needs to be a lot of education for the customers to make them aware of this is what we offer and how we offer it. And it's simple things like marketing materials and brochures and awareness in the call center and the customer care staff to make customers aware of this. And it's those small things, and that then allowed this implementation to then go ahead later on and be a successful implementation as well. So yeah, just to add to that.
All right, thank you so much. I see here on the chat we've got 2 questions. One question is just asking, how best would you go about introducing the discovery phase in an organization using the concept sprints?
Sure, yeah, I don't mind tackling that. So I think a lot of the time it comes down to getting that innovation culture first. So what we see is companies really want to be innovative, and they've got great ways in which they can be innovative, but it needs to go one step further to have that culture of saying, well, let's be almost, you've got to be bold and got to be brave in the way we go about wanting to find new and innovative features and solutions to introduce. So I think it starts a step back, most likely, in having that innovative culture. But also at the same time, if you position to various excos or the board to say, well, we've got this project we want to introduce, and most projects these days are going to cost upwards of 5 million rand, particularly any app projects or tech focus projects, and it's a big risk for any organization, no matter how big. So instead of risking all of that, it comes back down to, well, let's spend a week or two, or much smaller sum of money, to actually validate and make sure that what we're building is right. And then, like we said earlier, it's the artifacts and the solutions you can take moving forward as well, and giving you that clarity and reducing risk at the end of the day. So probably the innovation elements in the beginning, but also the way in which concept discovery sprints are positioned before a massive project is introduced into an organization.
Wow, great stuff. Maybe this one should go to Cody. There's another question asking, great toolkit. How does the product owner and user experience design split on who performs what toolset execution?
Sure. You know, ultimately it's going to boil down to following the process. The way that we run our concept discovery sprints is sort of a collective approach. We try to make sure that all stakeholders are in the room throughout each day that we run, because we want to make sure that we're getting insights and we're getting the thinking from all different areas of the business. We want to make sure that we have all the minds that we need to really figure out which concepts and which solutions and which problems we want to solve for. Ultimately, you want to make sure that you have someone who understands the thinking, who understands the tools being used, but also is focused on ensuring that ultimately, whatever we're doing, whether or not you use certain tools, I think the spirit of the concept discovery sprint is more important. At the end of the day, you know, toolkits and tools are going to differ, but it's about ensuring that you're putting the customer at the center and ensuring that you are solving for the customer's problems in a way that they want and in a way that makes sense. So even though tools are going to differ, you want to make sure you have someone who's leading it, who understands the spirit of what needs to be done in validating along and iterating until you've come up with a really great solution.
Okay. I think there's from XT, sometimes the product decides upfront regarding the features they want. So as an internal BA in an organization that is not innovation savvy, how can one introduce concept discovery sprints? And great presentation.
Yeah. So I think what we are leaning towards is really, like I said, that innovation culture. So start with talking to your product owners and your heads of your various teams and thinking of how can we get innovative. So there's a number of different innovation courses that people can take. So it's firstly that culture and that mindset. And then again, it goes back to, if you hear about a new idea that might be implemented in your organization. Let's say someone's got a great new credits application process that they want to introduce, and introducing AI into that journey, and having smart credit decisioning. It might sound like a great idea, but I think as anyone in that organization that doesn't want products and projects to fail, because that comes at a cost to more than just your organization, it's taking a step back and having that braveness. It always comes down to being brave and being bold and saying, well, before we go there, we need to test this idea. It might sound great, and I know, especially when there's a lot of buzzwords thrown at decision-making bodies and excos and so on, buzzwords do a lot for selling a project. But it's more than that. You've got to actually have your real, tangible, quantifiable information at your disposal to say, this is really what we can say about this project. This is what our customers say. This is what the market's telling us. And this is what other organizations are doing. So it's almost taking a stance to say, let's test it first. It's going to cost a lot more if we don't test it. And let's get it's almost the fundamentals right first. It's making sure what we wanting to introduce answers those three questions like we went through.
If I could add to that, Mike, if you don't mind, I love what you said there, but and it's funny you say that. You often find that most people who make product decisions, if you don't have any information to make those decisions, you're basically trying to find your way in the dark. To really make product decisions, you have to have insight. You have to have information that's telling you that this is the way to go. So if you question whether or not that information is available, or that evidence is there, that's going to help sort of drive and position a concept discovery sprint in your organization, because that's going to help you get that insight very quickly in a cost-effective way.